Hey there, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to dissect a deal. I just sold a house, and the circumstances around the sale I think would be pretty helpful for buyers and sellers alike. So let's get to it. Hi, I'm Stephen J.B. Davis, your land specialist and residential realtor serving the Bluegrass and beyond. And I want to talk about 125 Hickory Meadows Drive. I want to talk about this sale because for five reasons. I think that there are five real estate principles. They're not the only five, but there are five really clear ones that the circumstances of this sale really helped to highlight. And I think it could serve as a productive compass for buyers and sellers to understand essentially how to have success. I mean, that's my job as a realtor, to make sure that my clients achieve success. But sometimes success is not just the sale. It's not closing, it's how you close. How much money do you have left over? How much money did you spend? How long did it take? All that kind of stuff. So I want to break down a few aspects of, like what was the environment like for trying to sell this place, and what lessons, probably some harsh lessons that you might learn depending on how you're coming at the real estate market. You may even be an agent watching this, but I want to talk about it. Okay, so we've got five principles here, but let's start with some background. So this house is 3-ish years old. My sellers were the only people to ever own it. It was a spec home. A spec home that's a phrase, at least in our market, that we use to describe a brand new construction home, but the builder has chosen all of the insides. Not a custom home, but it's not like my sellers sat down with these folks and said, what do you want the grout to look like? What kind of counters do you want? They basically built a house, the builders built a house, and then said, eventually someone will come and they will like it. That's what a spec home is. It's like buying a car off the lot, for lack of better words. So there's that. They were the only people to ever own it, and they were moving. So they wanted to sell, and I said, okay, first up, let's get an appraisal. Like, I have an idea of what I think it's worth, but let's just make sure. Making sure had a lot to do with their next chapter, so let's double check. And this house is sold for $760,000. So it's not a small amount of money. This isn't a starter home. It's not a home in distress or anything like that. It's a really nice, almost new home, and we wanted to make sure that they were set up for success, and managing expectations around what a reasonable measures of success would be by getting an appraisal. And so when you're standing to earn a significant portion of money back, a lot of people balk at this idea of like, oh, the buyer should get an appraisal. Sure, and a buyer who's getting a loan is going to get an appraisal in most instances, and sometimes even with cash, buyers will want to get an appraisal. The thing that you need to understand about appraisals, and this isn't even a principle that I want to discuss, I just want to pause here though. The thing about appraisals that folks need to understand is there is no trigger in the public record that your home or your property was appraised. Having an appraisal done doesn't mean you have to disclose anything to the public. Appraisals that you elect to get are your business. Just like if you had a plumber come in and do an entire new plumbing inspection of your home 3 years into living there, you're not obligated to then publish the inspection report to any and everybody on Facebook. Appraisals it's private information. Just like when a buyer gets an appraisal once you're under contract, they're not obligated to share it with you. It's their property. They're not obligated to share an inspection with you. It's their property. They paid for it. Now, when they start asking for things like, hey, we want to renegotiate the price because the appraisal said this, well, now they need to substantiate why they want to renegotiate the price by showing the appraisal. But having an appraisal on its own as a seller does not mean that everyone will then know that you had one and that everyone will suddenly know what the price came in as. An appraisal before you sell is a really great way to understand how another appraiser may come in and say what your house is worth. It's to manage expectations. It's a really great way when sellers think that their price is up here, which was not my sellers, and I think that their price is here in terms of fair market value. When we're this far apart, it's like, hey, if you don't want to believe me, even though I'm generally quite good at evaluating a property's worth, go get a second opinion, get a licensed appraisal opinion, and we'll see. And if I am wrong, then now we've got more things to talk about. And if I'm right, well, now you can kind of come down to earth and figure out what is most likely to happen when someone gives you an offer. Or even if they give you the offer up here, if they require an appraisal, maybe now you know that after two price opinions, mine and then an appraisal price opinion, that this is not going to be substantiated way up here from the offer. It's really great when you get those offers that are just so good to be true, and then everything else in the market indicates that actually your property is worth $300,000-$400,000 less than what that offer was. You don't get bonus points just because someone shot above the moon. Now, if they're willing to pay an appraisal gap, we're talking something different. And during COVID times, wow, that was happening all over the residential market here. It was like, yeah, I'll overpay, and whatever my bank won't cover, I will make up the difference out of my own pocket. That is a very different thing. But when someone offers you something and they're still requiring that the property appraises, like, that number doesn't really mean anything, especially if you have overwhelming evidence that your property is not worth as much as they're offering in the first place. I digress. So we got an appraisal. I think my price opinion and the appraised value was within like $7,000 of, like, we had a $7,000 difference. So at that price, upper 700,000s, like, we're all feeling pretty good about like what to expect and where to kind of hold our line if we get offers that maybe aren't as good as what we're hoping. Like, we've now defined a scale of happiness is what I call it. Like, we know what it's worth. We have a little wiggle room on either side, pricing it above what the appraised value is and how far we go below the appraised value to establish like, hey, if we don't get the appraised value, but it's this, it's still a win for us. We're still happy. So we get the appraisal, we get on the market, people come see it. They don't like it for one reason or another. The backyard is sloped, not so much that you can't use the backyard. It's on like an acre and some change, but it slopes. There's not a lot of flat. You'd have to do some retaining walls or maybe build a trail, whatever. So some people didn't like the backyard. Other people didn't like that it had an unfinished basement. While some people loved that it had an unfinished basement, but they didn't like the configuration of the rooms. Like, all of this, we're getting a lot of feedback, but no offers. And 242 days pass with no offers. So that is the setup. That's kind of where we left things, and we took it off the market and made it an office exclusive. Excuse me. We had to wait. In our MLS rules, you can reset days on market by taking something off the market for 30 days or more. So it could be on the market for 2 days, and if you take it off the market for 30 days, on that 31st day when you put it back on, it starts as 1 day on market again. So I thought that'd be beneficial because 242 days starts to get into some what was wild is that on day one, being back on market publicly, we had an offer. We got a showing and then we had an offer, which was wild. So, what did we learn? What are the principles here behind the sale that I think are important? The first two principles go together, okay? And it's all about time on market. So principle 1A is that time on market does not necessitate a large discount. The key word is necessitate. Sometimes it does mean you get a large discount, but time on market does not unequivocally necessitate a large discount on a home, right? If it's priced well, just because the home's been on the market for a long time doesn't mean that it is necessarily worth less. Now, if we had priced this property at $1.5 million, knowing that it is not worth $1.5 million at all, and it sat on the market, yeah, it would necessitate a large discount. But this home was priced well. It was priced very much within its fair market value, which is a range and not a point. It was priced well within its fair market value. We started at $770 and then ultimately sold for $760. So 98% of what they were asking for is what they got. I mean, that's a great win. So time on market does not necessarily mean you get a large discount. Coupled with that, time on market does not necessarily mean that something is wrong with the house. And these are two ideas that I think buyers engage the real estate market with all the time. And I don't really understand how that, with such little information, right? Like, they haven't been in the house, all they can see is pictures, like, with that little amount of information, buyers jump to, oh, well, it's been on a long time, something must be wrong. Oh, it's been a long time, I should get, a 20% discount. I want 80% of the list price. I don't know how we logically get there. I understand the emotional want to have something cheaper for the lowest price possible. That makes sense. But logically speaking, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I often use this phrase or this metaphor. If you were to go to a luxury car dealership and you saw these cars and you see two cars, one that's been on the lot for 2 months and one that's been on the lot for a week. Same amount of miles, like no one's test driven one more than the other, same features. You don't go to a car salesman and say, well, I want $25,000 off, or I don't know, $5,000 off of the car that you've had on the lot longer. There's nothing wrong with the car, guys. There's nothing wrong with it. It just hasn't sold. There's no difference between the car that's been on the lot for a week and the car that's been on the lot for 2 months. And so in those terms, I think it starts to become clear how absurd it is to jump to the conclusion that something should be cheaper because it's been sitting there longer. It's not a perishable item like eggs or meat at a deli. It's a house. It's a house. And so that leads me to the third real estate principle, which relates to these first two. It builds off the first two, is that real estate always comes down to time or money. They're both going to be important, but at the end of the day, every buyer and every seller is going to have to put one of those above the other. Okay? And this concept is demonstrated by really how much money you have and the necessity of moving versus a desire to move. Put it to you this way. If you're worth $200 billion I'm not. If you're watching this, you're probably not. But if you're worth $200 billion and say you've got a property that you want to sell for 40 million, but everything in that luxury market, let's call it in California, says that it is worth, I don't know, half that, $20 million. Well, if you're worth 200 billion, you can afford to wait. Right? You don't need to sell your $40 million property. You just probably want to. It'd be nice. It'd be better for your portfolio to free up space to buy other stuff or to reinvest in whatever. But like, you don't need to sell. You have the luxury of time because you have enough money to wait. Whereas most people that are buying and selling are not in that position. They are selling and they need to sell because they have to use that money in order to buy the next place. And they need the next place because they're starting a new job or their kids need to be in this particular school district or whatever. They need to sell. Likewise, if you are buying, and you don't have to sell it. Maybe you were renting before and now you're gonna go buy, but you're relocating or you don't want to sign up for another lease. Well, right now that means that like time is not your friend. You must buy. So now you're stuck. I shouldn't say stuck, but now your market looks like the market that is immediately in front of you, real time every day. You're not looking at a market for like, maybe a year from now I'll buy. Like you're not renewing your lease, right? You can't do month to month. Like you have to buy something. You've got the money, but time is not your friend. You don't have enough money to wait. You can't do a whole other lease and still be able to then turn around and buy something. It always comes down to time or money. And in my client's case, they had the time. They had already moved. They were completely fine having 2 sets of bills, managing this house that they no longer lived in, a lot of money for their mortgage, utilities, whatever, and now a new residence with its own set of bills, right? And so looking at time on market, you wouldn't know that as the consumer. You're jumping to the conclusion that, something must be wrong. They need to sell. No, they don't. And on top of that, my clients were in a particular place, and this isn't saying too much, but they were in a particular place where they didn't have a lot of money on their mortgage. Every dollar that they were spending, or almost every dollar they were spending, was going toward the principal of their mortgage. Once they sold, they were going to see all that money back. They weren't paying back the cost of borrowing money. They were just paying back the money that they had borrowed, if that makes sense. So they were fine. They could have waited another 100 days before we really reevaluated, and maybe longer, I don't know. I'm just putting a number on it, but they weren't squeezed, they weren't pressed, they weren't pressured. There was no necessity. It was, we've moved, we've started our next thing, we'd like to sell this place, but we want the price that we want. Money was more important for them than time. They're both important, but money came number one. And the thing was, they could afford to wait. And when you put these first 3 principles together, that time on market does not necessitate a large discount, that time on market does not necessarily mean something's wrong with the property or with the mortgage, and that time and money can only one of those can fill like a number 1 spot, that every deal comes down to that. When you put all those 3 things together, the conclusion that I'm hoping that you're drawing, or at least willing to understand and accept, is that there are a lot of things you can't know as a buyer about what's going on with the seller. What you're engaging in the real estate market is not the same type of business and the same type of transaction as Toyota saying that they're going to hostily take over Ford. Or even if they're not hostily taking over, let's just say that Ford decides they want to sell to Toyota. In a deal like that, you talk price and terms. You also get to read through the entire financial history, like probably up to, 5 years of the business that you're buying. When you're buying a house, you get to see a seller's disclosure, you get to see the house that's being sold, and you get to have an inspection. You don't get to know the financial standing of the sellers. Every once in a while, sure, you might see a short sale out there, which necessarily indicates that a property is distressed. You may run into someone selling a home where they're outwardly saying that this is a home that's being sold because of divorce. You might get snippets here and there, but you have zero transparency on the deep circumstances under which someone is selling a home. So then that means you necessarily cannot jump to conclusions around what must be wrong or not wrong with the house before you've ever stepped foot into it. Now you're just speculating. Now you're just gambling. Anybody can pull a slot machine and maybe strike right. But you didn't really exercise any skill. You exercised some motor function, but you didn't like game a system. You got lucky. And so are you really trying to gamble by speculating with hundreds of thousands of dollars of your hard-earned money as a buyer at stake? I venture to say no. So that's what those first three principles are about. Time on market, and time versus money. Those are things that you have to think about as you're choosing what to price your property at, as you're choosing the type of home you want to live in as a buyer, and understanding really the game that you're playing, which is the fourth principle. You have to be ready as a buyer or seller to learn the game, like the rules of it. So you've got to have an open mind. It's not just about your perception and just about what you want. It's about how economics actually work. You have to be willing to understand those basic economics and understanding and defining what a win is for you. Too often, buyers and sellers start trying to count the dollars of the opposition, or what they perceive as the opposition. Meaning, if you're a buyer, your opposition is the seller. If you're a seller, your opposition is the buyer. And really, that's not the way the game is set up in the first place, right? In football, basketball, baseball, there's a winner and a loser. You're trying to get more runs than the other team in baseball. You're trying to shoot more baskets, Final Fours today, than the other team in basketball. You're trying to score more points via touchdown, field goal, extra points, safeties, which I still find very funny that this is the sign for safety. But there's a winner and a loser. When you're selling real estate in these typical ways, we're not talking about commercial, we're not talking about anything like that. When you're buying primary residences or even second homes and stuff, the rule of the game is, what is a win for me? Because you don't get to see how much debt the other person is in. You don't get to see if actually when they buy their new house, they're going to be taking care of an elderly parent. You have no idea what those conditions are to be able to negotiate on the terms of what they're getting out of the deal. You don't know what they're getting out of the deal. You have zero clue. So instead, you have to use your offer as leverage, you have to use your capital as leverage, and you have to use your terms as leverage, and then figure out, you know what, I'm going to run this race. If I ran a 100-meter dash and I got a PR, meaning a personal record, for those of you who are not in like the sports world, but you run the best race you've ever done and you still get beat. So that's how you have to think about it. It's a little bit of a competition, yes. There's a win-loss idea, yes, but not in the binary terms that we normally think of them. But there's also did I run my race? Did I do my best? Did I put my best foot forward? That is what I mean by you have to be ready to learn the game, and also learning and understanding what is a win for you. I used to be a track guy. I was really fast and I could jump really far. If I'm running a 10.9 in the 100, which yes, I could run that back in the day, fully automatic timing, by the way. If I'm running a 10.9 and some other guy smokes me with like a 10.85, I'm sad to lose. But I'm not about to be over looking at him about what he did and didn't do. I'm thinking about how I just ran my best race. Like that, it is a personal win for me. And so in real estate terms, what that looks like is, okay, are you spending money as a buyer within your realm of happiness? Can you legitimately afford it and it not like stretch you to like the edge of financial destruction, right? Like what are the terms around your happiness? And then maybe you spend a little bit more, but you're still in that range. But you get the house, like that's a win. You got the house, and you're able to afford it, and you're not going to be financially ruined. That's the win. You don't know what those extra $3,000 to get that win means for the other side. So stop being concerned with things like that you won't know and can't know. On the flip side, for the sellers, learning the game, understanding the game is this idea around list price versus sale price. You can list for anything you want, but if your true objective is to sell the house, the market is going to tell you what it's worth in most cases. Now, of course, there are times when there aren't comps because you have a super unique property or you're in a locale where things don't sell very much. But generally speaking, if your house has been appraised or if there's enough data to come up with some reliable stats around what houses like yours typically sell for, you can then create a range of what the fair market value is. And the further outside you get on the fair market value for list price in terms of what the public sees, the less people that are coming to your place and the less people that are going to give you an offer. The more you undersell yourself, you'll get a lot of people, but it almost has like a reverse effect. People see something's undervalued and then they want to further degrade that price or whatever. But within that fair market value, figure out what keeps you happy. You're not going to be totally happy, most likely. There's going to be something that you concede on. But if you could sell within that scale of happiness and you're, kind of on the lower end of the scale, but you sold the house and you have enough money to get to that next stage or whatever the case is that you're doing this next chapter, it's a win. Take the win. Buyers and sellers have to learn how to take the win by first defining what a win means for them. Learn the game, understand what the win is for yourself. That's principle number 4. And then the last one is not a pat on my back. It's more, be careful about who you work with. That's the best way I can say it. Interview people. When you have hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake that you're spending or that you stand to earn, or is going to propel you into the next property that you're going to buy for your family or whomever, stop hiring people just because they answered the phone. It's not that everyone who's a Zillow agent or everyone who gets leads off of Zillow is a bad agent. I know some great agents who Zillow leads are a part of their major business. Like it's like a third of their business, a half of their business. But when you are treating the transaction of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in the way that you call a customer service hotline where anyone will do, you're not even ready to step on the field. You're not ready to play the game because you're not taking your transaction seriously. A realtor can't be trustworthy if you've not taken the time to learn the things that they're good at or not good at in order for you to trust them. People call me all the time. They just want to see the place. They just want to know what their property is worth. I usually cannot tell you what your property is worth having never set foot, and you'd be shocked how people, they don't want me to come visit their house. I don't know how I'm supposed to give a trusted opinion, a professional one that they're going to rely on, whether they hire me or try to do it themselves, by not seeing their place. Similarly with buyers, oh, okay, so you like this house, that's great. Well, let's talk a little bit more about like how location factors into what, well, no, I just want to see the house. Okay, well, is this like within your price range? Are you just kind of like curious about the market right now? I just want to see the house. So they just want someone to show them the house. which a lot of agents will do. And then as they then get further along in the process, whether they're just trying to access information or they truly do find the house they want and they're ready to buy, which is rarely the case, but if they are ready to buy, they've not taken time to get to know this agent who picked up the phone just like, yes, I'll do whatever you want. And they're often disappointed by way of surprise, by way of confusion, by way of not feeling disoriented around what's happening next, by way of being stressed, because all of those important questions that professional agents try to ask buyers or sellers at whatever point of meeting them, people just, they want to speed past that. It isn't to say that all realtors are perfect. I'm not here defending all realtors. I'm here to defend the integrity of your dollars. And the only way you do that is by taking some time to talk about whatever that goal is as a buyer or a seller. That's the only way. If you've got 6 hours to run somebody around and look at houses, you have a half an hour to talk about what it is you want. If you're really serious about offloading your property or properties, where you're going to net whatever amount of money, I'd want to talk to whoever was going to be handling that. If I was going to make $2 million and someone's going to be responsible for making sure that $2 million ends up in my pocket, or that $250,000, whatever, pick a number, I would want to know what that person's all about. So be intentional about who you work with. Ask questions. You know what's important to you. You may not know the process. Maybe you aren't interested in learning about the process. That's your prerogative. But you know what's important to you. And it's not just your bottom line. Because if you get your bottom line, but the entire time you've been pained doing it, you've been confused doing it, you've had to show your own property, or you've been inconvenienced and surprised and people are just showing up at all times of the day, like, the process does matter. You want it to be smooth. If you're riding in first class but there's turbulence along the way and no champagne, are you really happy that you spent the couple grand to ride at the front of the plane to not get first class treatment? I know I'd be pretty pissed off. So those are my things. Time on market doesn't necessitate large discounts. Time on market doesn't necessarily mean that there are defects or distress with the property. Real estate comes down to time or money as the number one thing for a buyer and for a seller. They may not always be the same thing for each party. You have to be willing to learn about the game that you're playing and defining what a win is for you, not the people on the other side of the negotiation table. And last but not least, you got to be intentional about who you're working with. This was a long one. I had a lot to say, I know, but I appreciate if you've listened. Certainly if you're watching a short, I've been trying to chop these up to give people more bite-sized information. So that's what I got for you. I think that it'll likely be applicable in lots of real estate markets, not just mine here in the central Kentucky area. But next up for you, I've got a luxury report coming, and that should be, I think it's interesting. I mean, there is luxury here in Kentucky. There's plenty of it. And the report just came out this past February. I just haven't had time to make a video about it. Lots of transactions going on, and I felt like I wanted to talk about this first. So happy Final Four day, go blue, and it's Easter weekend. So if you're a person who celebrates Easter, happy Resurrection Sunday, happy Easter, and be safe out there. Thanks for watching. Adios.